Hello, this is our Intersectionality interview for Dr. Dorgan's Intercultural Communication course at East Tennessee State University. I am Michaela and this is Alex, and this project meets the requirement for a course and is for educational purposes only.
So this project that we're doing is covering the topic of intersectionality. This is a theoretical framework that is used to study identities, how they work independently and interdependently to show micro and macro level inequalities. And this interview is here to just discuss the identities that we identified with within the group and the differences and similarities that we see with them. So would you like to start? I'm sorry.
Yeah, definitely. So in our 2019 Intercultural Communication class at East Tennessee State, we discussed social locations such as ability, geography, gender. Thinking about these social locations, how would you describe yourself?
It's funny when I think about how I would identify myself. I wouldn't explicitly maybe say the identities that we used, which were gender, geography, and ability. But when I think about them in terms of how they affect me, I would say that I'm a young male hailing from the South Central Appalachian region. I want to say that's right. I think the one identity that really affects me mostly a lot of time is my ability, which is diabetes. And the ability, I would say that my own identity is influenced by those a lot, and there's, depending on the day where, wherever I might be struggling more, other identities might kind of take over as the primary identifier. However, like the intersectionality tenet talks about how identity is more than the other. But yeah, I would say that would be the most concise way I would explain my own identity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I relate to that a lot because it's weird because ability is definitely identity that affects me the most. But if someone asked me to describe myself, I wouldn't even think about mentioning that. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I don't even think I'd mention my other identities that I used either. I wouldn't probably mention that I'm Southern. Definitely wouldn't mention my anxiety, and I definitely probably wouldn't be mm-hmm. I'm a woman. I mean, I might, I guess, but I also feel like that might be kind of a given. But then also, mm-hmm. you can't assume that either. So,
no, exactly.
But yeah, they definitely do influence. They all three of them influence me quite a bit. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wouldn't use either one of them to describe me if I had to describe who I am, because mm-hmm. I would take that more as a personality question.
So I guess to kind of expand on that, when you think back, what are some of the earliest messages that were associated with these social identities? Is there any one that you started picking up more that others saw that identity on you more? Does that make sense?
It's kind of, well, with ability especially, it's I've had anxiety my whole life, but I didn't know I had anxiety until I was 14. And then once I found out, once I was diagnosed with an anxiety disorder, it was just everything clicked, and it was that makes so much sense.
Yep.
In elementary school, I didn't want to answer any questions because I was deathly afraid of being wrong, and then just feeling super ashamed and embarrassed mm-hmm. once I was wrong, just because I felt everyone around me was just judging me for being wrong.
Exactly.
And it would bring me to tears when I was younger. And at first it just made me feel so stupid for doing that. But then once I had a label of being oh, I have social anxiety, I have something that causes that, mm-hmm. it was I don't know, it made me feel a lot more comfortable, I guess.
Well, and it's nice too, because then you realize that it's not just you that's suffering from it.
Yeah.
Especially when you're younger, when you hear you're struggling with something, you're I'm the only one that's struggling with this, and it feels isolated. Mm-hmm. But then finding out a condition especially can be okay, here's how you get help. Here are other people that have that.
Yeah. And I think that's the awesome thing about identities, because while you can't prioritize any one over the other, mm-hmm. and you can't single them out because you constantly have multiple different identities mm-hmm. that make up you, it's nice to be hey, there's other people that have this. I'm mm-hmm. not just, it's not just me. I'm not just crazy. I have anxiety. That's part of my identity. So yeah, I definitely think that's one of the cool things about identities.
Absolutely.
So suppose someone from another planet visited Earth and asked you to describe your life as a Southern male with diabetes. What would you say?
I would say that the life that I have is very courteous. Given the Appalachian regions, we're very polite. So I don't know. There's definitely like a community courtesy that I experience, and given what we were saying earlier with privileges, with identity, there is definitely a noticeable attribute that comes from being a male in this area. I know especially. There's kind of that southern, like, oh honey, or like, so it's like directed towards women a lot of time, and there's a lot of that I have not had to experience. And then given with the intersection of ability, I don't know, I wouldn't say that I've had a lot of particular instances where I'm like, I hate being a diabetic in this region. It's not, I've never had that attribute. I think it's definitely opened my eyes to see other people's struggles with that, especially in this area, in terms of like the lower income levels and poverty, and being around that community of like Appalachian diabetics. A lot of people can't afford medication. A lot of people can't get around to doctor's appointments, and just like the knowledge behind it's not there. So I think that there's, I would say it can definitely be difficult, but at the same time, giving that politeness in the area. And that the male privilege part of that, it's there are plenty of resources, and there are a lot of people to communicate with, and it's not an overburdensome life.
Yeah. It's interesting that you bring up the point of like how your ability doesn't really like intersect too much with like being Southern, or you haven't had like much experiences with that like negatively impacting you. Because with my ability, I feel like, because you mentioned like you honed in on like the politeness of the South, and like that like mixed in with my social anxiety, like I feel bad because I don't feel like I'm as courteous as what I should be, just because like it makes me so uncomfortable. Like people holding the door open for me is like the nicest thing, but like I'm also like, ooh, this is so awkward.
Yeah, it's like do you have to go to the next door to open it for them?
Like, I rather just open my own door. But so like for me, like ability and geography actually intersect quite a bit, which is like weird because like you wouldn't think that they would.
Yeah.
But like with like that Southern hospitality, like I feel like my anxiety holds me back from doing that a lot, which is like frowned upon in this area, and can like have me like mislabeled as like being like pretty like stuck up or like rude, which I don't see myself as such. So if someone were to ask me like from another planet, like to describe my experience as like a Southern woman with anxiety, I would probably mention that. And then also with just being like a woman, I mean, there's a lot of like disadvantages with being a woman. Like the safety thing is like one that really stinks, because like I am constantly like just aware of my surroundings, and it stinks that like I have to be, but like
it's exhausting.
Yeah, it's not fun, and like even like I have to worry about like working, or when I work I have to worry about walking out to my car, and it's just like all that stuff can be exhausting. But then it's also like I've done it for so long that like I'm so used to it that I don't even know if I'd like, I might mention that a little bit, but I also would be like, I mean, it's just normal.
And that's what's nice about with the identity of gender, especially. I think it's easy to find, like you were saying, how with like anxiety, you identify with other people through that identity, and you like create that sense of community through identity. And there is that, especially I've noticed that within personal relationships, like with my girlfriend, for example, and seeing how like she can get a hold of someone in the area that's like a female that wants to walk with her, and just to help feel safe, and like that. It's cool how that identity can help foster that community and that protection.
Yeah, definitely. But then that's also another thing where my anxiety kind of intersects with that. Is like there's sometimes where like I don't feel comfortable like hey, will you like come walk with me, because like I don't want to be alone. So it's kind of like, well, like I'm terrified to ask for help, but I'm also terrified of getting killed. So like I guess we'll just hope for the best.
That's true. So
I'm sorry.
You were saying how there's the similarity of kind of the stereotypes put with geography, for example. Whereas also like some of the same stereotypes, not in terms of like specificity, but like a stereotype is put on with your ability. Also too, I guess within say gender and geography, identifying as female within both of those can carry on that negative attribute. Mm-hmm. Like within Appalachia, you've got the restrictions of like being the center of family. Mm-hmm. Whereas like if identifying under just their gender identity, there's all of the disparities and just frustrations that can come from being a woman that identifies. Mm-hmm. So there's that similarity of just shared struggle almost. Mm-hmm. And same with ability, whereas it might not have the similarity of gender in the sense that both of those have, but even just identifying with a certain attribute of that identity will just carry an amount of problems that you might not experience if you did not. Yeah, we really have trouble seeing some of the similarities between each one. I mean, it's hard. It's much easier to think about each one independently. Yeah. But I mean, we see how they affect each other, and we see how they come and intersect, and the similarities that come across when they join, but not so much in terms of in their own respects. How are they similar? Mm-hmm.
I think maybe you could even because you were talking about in a broader aspect earlier, but I think even just looking at your own individual identities, you can make the point of it's kind of there's advantages to every single identity and disadvantages to every single identity. So I feel with especially the identity of the woman, a lot of times it feels like you're kind of like if you do something, then you're doing something bad, and if you don't do something, you're doing something bad. Does that make sense? The first one that comes to my mind is just kind of the idea of if a woman has sex, then she's a slut, and if a woman doesn't, then she's a prude, and it's just that constant battle of you're never gonna you're never gonna make everybody happy. Yeah. And so with every identity, I just feel there's kind of that same tension of there's always going to be people that are going to look at that identity and they're going to be oh, you're a dumb southerner, or you're just an incompetent woman, or you're someone that can't talk to people, you've got anxiety, you can't do anything. But at the same time, there's going to be people, there's going to be advantages also to those identities. Being in the South, Southerners are probably going to be more reciprocal to you because it's just because you have that common ground. And the same with being a woman, with other women you're gonna have that common ground. So I don't know if that makes any sense.
No, it does actually. I think you're right. I think it boils down to the fact that they're similar a lot of times because each identity will come with those who struggle and with those who prevail, or just those who have an upper hand. And that's similar across all of them.
Yeah. And then just even comparing it across the board, with anxiety, for example, I'm privileged with my anxiety because you can't see it. Yeah. Unless I tell you about it, no one's going to know about it, so you can't openly discriminate against me for it. But also that's one of the mental illnesses that isn't as frowned upon as other ones, schizophrenia or bipolar disorder.
Huge stigma.
Yeah, there's a huge stigma. Those are the scary disorders. And anxiety is oh, okay, well you just can't talk to people. That's fine. Yeah. Even though there is still some negative stigma surrounding it. But
well, that was good. I guess that concludes our video.
Yeah.
Thank you for this project and the work that we've got to do together. And Dr. Dorgan, thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks.
And I think we're out of time. And I hope my battery doesn't die before we get to turn the off button. So
that would be very sad.